In his retrospective for Season 2 of The Simpsons, The Real Jim's noted that the second entry of something tends to set a lot of things in stone for a franchise. This is certainly true of Lupin III, as I imagine most people watching this know of the series through things that the second series helped to cement. Series 1 of Lupin III didn't do too well in the ratings during its initial run, and ended up being cancelled as a result. Thankfully, as I mentioned in my last video, the last episode served as a good finale to the series while keeping things open enough to bring it back. The series survived through repeats and managed to find its audience in that manner. 1974 also saw the release of a live-action movie, Strange Psychokinetic Strategy. I haven't seen it as of this video, so the only thing I could tell you about it is that Jigen is played by Kunio Tanaka, who also served as the basis for One Piece's Admiral Kizaru. By 1977, TMS decided to take a gamble on making another series, this one airing on Nippon TV. This series takes more from the latter half of Series 1, but brings back at least some of Lupin's ruthless nature seen in the earlier episodes. While Series 1 seemed to mostly take place in Japan, Series 2 opts for more of a globe-trotting adventure approach, with episodes and heists taking place across the world. It also incorporates a few real-world politics and events of the time, something the American distributor tried to write around for some reason, and didn't exactly manage to always, as we'll see when I get to the episodes. On top of that, there are also a few movie parodies and pop culture references that I'll cover when we get to them, and if I'm able to recognise them. This series is actually known as a few different names by fans. Japan at the time referred to it as Shin Lupin III, essentially the New Adventures, to use that old marketing moniker. In the West, it tends to also be known as the Red Jacket era, due to Lupin switching jacket colour from green back to red. Clocking in at an impressive 155 episodes, and no clip shows, this series remains one of the best known iterations of Lupin III. Not every episode is a winner, but the many different studios and writers working on episodes, including a few fan submissions, meant you never got anything that was exactly the same as what came before. Returning from Series 1 are Yasuo Yamada, Kiyoshi Kobayashi and Goro Naya in the same roles they played in Series 1. Returning from the pilot, and episode 14 of Series 1, is Eiko Masayama reprising Fujiko. Chikao Otsuka doesn't return as Goemon, but he will stay on in smaller roles throughout the franchise. Instead, Captain Harlock actor Makio Inoue steps up to voice Goemon, and stays with the role for the next 3 decades. With that, barring one instance, the cast is set for some time. Series 1's music was quite low-key in my view, along with some charmingly bizarre tracks like the Lupin Nice Guy song. Series 2 brings in Yuji Ono as the composer, with Sandy Hone and Go Diego's Tommy Snyder providing most of the vocals. Yuji Ono's approach is much more energetic in comparison, though not without its slower pieces, with tracks including Superhero, Samba Temporado, Tornado, the Zenigata March, and of course the now famous theme of Lupin III. This theme has been remixed and reimagined many times throughout the years, but keeps the same melody throughout. Series 2 alone has 4 variants, including a vocal version sung by Pete Mack Jr. The endings also keep tradition of being more melancholy, with my personal favourite being the first ending, Love Theme. To bring it back to comparing it to The Simpsons, Yuji Ono is essentially Lupin's Alf Clausen, with both composers coming in with Series 2 and defining the direction of the music from then on. So, with all of that covered, let's start climbing the 155 episode mountain that is Series 2. In a bit of a meta-narrative, 5 years have passed since the gang escaped from Zenigata during the whole business with the gold in the landfill. We get a brief introduction to Jigen, Goemon and Fujiko, who will receive an invitation to the luxury cruise ship Sirloin. Costing 1.2 trillion yen, this ship has everything from pools to racetracks and even a police station. Lupin parachutes in, making a graceful landing he can only pull off, and the gang catch up on old times. Confusion arises when the gang reveal they thought Lupin invited them to the sirloin, but Lupin thinks Fujiko invited him. With that, Zenigata makes his appearance, with Lupin happy to see him again. Zenigata's kept himself busy during the 5 years too, but now has jurisdiction to follow Lupin directly from Interpol, showing off his warrant. Lupin points out that the warrant is fake, missing Interpol's watermark, and suggests that they work together to unmask whoever invited them all here. And then the ceiling collapses, with a shadowy figure watching and laughing. The gang are subject to attacks as they try to enjoy themselves, with Goemon being manhandled by a phony masseuse and Jigen barely avoiding a snake-related death in the dentist's chair. Fujiko also avoids a swim with sharks in the pool thanks to Lupin's help. The gang are given another invitation to a fancy dinner that evening, with a very familiar looking logo. At the dinner, Lupin confirms that the logo is that of the Scorpion Gang, meaning their assailant is none other than Mr. X. Not that one. Mr. X congratulates them and takes them to the lower deck, with Lupin mocking him for spending so much just to kill him between the Hida Speedway and the ship. Mr. X underwent extensive surgery since the Hida Speedway incident and now has a nigh indestructible body, as Goemon and Jigen find out when he challenges them to attack. Seeing this, Lupin and Fujiko take a more indirect approach, taking a pair of cars Mr. X has offered as part of a weapon cache to challenge him, and driving them into the sides of the ship, causing a fire. The fire activates the sprinkler system and Lupin orders everyone out the water, shooting out a light fixture and electrocuting Mr. X. You know, something about this seemed very familiar. Mr. X is a sore loser, however, and activates a button embedded in his tooth, blowing up the sirloin. The gang escape but lament that Zenigata didn't make it. Zenigata isn't one to be taken down so easily though, and shows up on a turtle, chasing the gang ashore. We're off to a strong start with this episode. It does a good job of reintroducing everyone to the audience, and gives a nice callback to Series 1 with its antagonist, even if said antagonist is from an episode that didn't really serve as a good introduction. By contrast, I think a newcomer could easily come into this episode and not miss much even with the Series 1 references. We also see Lupin's nickname for Zenigata start to be used much more frequently here, namely Totsan, translated as either Old Man or Pops. It was used intermittently during Series 1, but it's practically his second name here. On top of that is the introduction of one of Jigen's recurring vices, his toothache. Personally, I like to think he's like George Prime and has a love of cheesecake. I mean, they are both baritone badasses, so I could see Jigen having a sweet tooth. As the title suggests, the gang are in Rio de Janeiro, planning to steal the ticket money from a football match against New York, with Pelé serving as the big draw. Based on a real match, by the way, for anyone interested. With the added lottery, the potential payout comes to about 2.7 billion yen. As part of the plan, they crash into the statue of Christ the Redeemer and get themselves arrested for DUI. Zenigata meets with Rio's police chief, Oliveira Net, and laughs at Lupin at getting caught over something so trivial. He is still suspicious and says as much to Net. Net assures him that they have more than enough security in place, and offers Zenigata a tour of Rio. His suspicions are correct, as the gang tap a Morse message to each other about the plan, knowing that Fujiko will arrive soon. She poses as a nurse, changing their sheets, and with the use of some perverted tactics in order to talk, as well as cover the camera with a sheet to set up a projector with their image playing. Knocking out and disguising as a stadium security, the gang hijack the van transporting the money. Net, who isn't aware of the projector yet, is informed of the van's course change, and Zenigata confirms his suspicions when he heads to Lupin's cell. Net orders a perimeter, and Zenigata helps determine where they hid the money. An officer comes in to talk about moving the Redeemer statue for repairs, and Zenigata realises that the gang are disguised as the transport team. As the gang lift the statue away, the police open fire and Zenigata tries and fails to climb aboard. The air support also goes down thanks to some creative fly swatting, but a hole caused by airlifting the statue by force ends up with the money spilling out over the city as the gang fly away. 2 for 2 on entertaining episodes so far, with a nicely planned out heist that may have ended up losing what they aimed for, but provided a good story in the meantime. Remember, it's not about the reward for Lupin unless it's a family matter. And also not the last time the gang steal an iconic statue in order to get at the real target, but we'll be seeing that when the time comes. Welcome to West Germany, circa 1977. Lupin is enjoying some fishing, but the others remind him they're there for a reason. A former aide to Hitler, Kreutzer Genhold, knows of the location of the Fuhrer's secret legacy. The problem is that he's in East Berlin, and the gang only have hideouts in the west side, meaning they'll need to smuggle him across the Berlin Wall. Zenigata has been tipped off in the meantime, and spots Lupin scoping out the wall, but is reminded he needs to report to the German police first before he can make a move. Lupin's biggest obstacle is the 100-metre gap surrounded by dogs, mines, searchlights, towers, you name it. 100 metres is easy enough for him to jump though. They pass through to East Berlin legit, with Zenigata getting held up by the border patrol when he tries to charge at Lupin. They locate Genhold and that night set up some hang gliders to jump across incognito. A shift in the wind causes Lupin to lose altitude, setting off the security instantly. Close to the floor, and worse still the landmines, Lupin fights to stay afloat, with Goemon tossing Zantetsuken at a wall ahead for a springboard, allowing him to land with style. Genhold doesn't respond to the gang's interrogation, so Fujiko suggests a more lavish approach. That doesn't work either, and Zenigata catches them while taking a photo to appreciate the nightlife, tracking Lupin down. The gang decide to reenact Hitler's last hours using a movie studio and making Genhold believe it's 1945. Lupin plays the man himself and asks for the legacy's location, which Genhold gives. Lupin unmasks, but the extras surround them, being made up of the police. Using some spare explosives as a distraction, the gang steal a plane and drive out to the Autobahn to escape. As for the legacy, it's Hitler's old low-scoring exam papers and drawings that he was embarrassed about. This episode was actually banned from airing on TV during its American run, and was released on DVD as episode 26. Not for the Hitler stuff, mind you, it was totally because they tried to pretend the series wasn't set in the 70s, and they couldn't think of a way to write around the Berlin Wall still standing in 2003. That's totally the reason. Controversy aside, the episode itself is entertaining enough at any rate, and it might inspire people to look at what life might have been like in Germany in the 1970s. Just don't act like Zenigata does around the German police. That goes for modern day too, by the way. Fujiko is enjoying a ride around Loch Ness when her singing attracts the monster itself. The rest of the gang is in Nice, but they fly straight over once they learn the news. After a brief encounter with Zenigata, they search the lake and discover Fujiko on the run from a man named Dr. Oz. Oz wants Fujiko for her singing to attract Nessie, as he was offered a lump sum for its capture, but she refuses, wanting Nessie to stay the enigma it currently is. Oz blasts her for this, having been attacked and losing a leg to it 20 years prior. So he tries torture, and then threatening Lupin's life. The former stops when he annoys himself, and the latter when Goemon thwarts the would-be killer. The gang are still pinned down by Oz's men, however, who are planting landmines to stop them moving. Jing encounters this by tuning the radio frequency to detonate them, and they move back out to the lake. While Goemon deals with Zenigata again, Lupin and Jigen are attacked by Oz's Mecha Nessie. Oz fills up the robot with water and tries to coerce Fujiko into singing again. She relents and Nessie approaches, only to be frozen by Mecha Nessie. As it's transported, the gang plays a recording of Fujiko's singing, allowing Nessie to break free and send Oz packing as it swims into the sunset. This marks the first of what I personally call the mythical episodes. Decent enough episodes, with Zenigata's antics providing a nice break to the main narrative. I think one thing you'll learn with this series is that all myths seem to have some truth to them, in a sort of reverse Scooby-Doo in a way. We'll be skipping slightly ahead next time as I take a look at the first animated movie, The Secret of Mamo. Until then,